name's Alec Ross. I'm currently writing a book about the industries and businesses of the future, describing what the next wave of globalization portends for both good and ill. If I learned one thing in 1,493 days working as Hillary Clinton's senior advisor for innovation, it's that there's a significant shift in geopolitical power that's taking place around the globe right now. And it's not necessarily from west to east. It's not necessarily from the United States and Europe to Asia, or from the global north to the global south, but it's from hierarchies like governments, like large media companies. The shift in power is from hierarchies to citizens and networks of citizens. I think that this is both good and bad. I think that on the one hand, it's good that we are decreasingly driven by cults of personality. I think leadership structures are evolving from those being dominantly pyramidal to looking more like the internet itself, looking more like a web than like a pyramid. This is both good and bad. It's good in that things are driven less by a cult of personality. It's bad in that groups of people might come together to tear something down, like a government. But after a government is torn down, then somebody needs to govern. And the absence of widely accepted leaders, the absence of traditional hierarchical leadership with associated institutions is part of why there is so much chaos in countries like Libya right now. Some people call these revolutions Facebook revolutions or Twitter revolutions. I actually don't believe that they were Facebook revolutions or Twitter revolutions. I think that people made revolution for 5 reasons: a lack of economic opportunity, a lack of democratic participation, frustration with ruling families, frustration about high levels of corruption, and high food prices. I think that those 5 things had more to do with why people made revolution than, say, Facebook or Twitter. Having said that, I do think that we can clearly identify 3 things that connection technologies did do in the context of these revolutions. First, it acted as an accelerant. So movements that historically would have taken years long to developed in days or weeks. Now, that's not to say that there weren't dissent movements prior, but they grew far larger, far faster than ever could have happened without the internet. That's thing 1. Thing 2 is it enriched the information environment. Everybody knows the story of Mohamed Bouazizi, the Tunisian fruit and vegetable vendor who lit himself on fire, December 17th of 2010. But few people know the story of the protests that took place 2 years earlier in the Gafsa mining basin, which started off far larger in a more densely populated part of Tunisia and were better organized than the initial protests after Bouazizi lit himself on fire. The reason why nobody knows about those protests and the Bouazizi protests led to the overthrow of a government is the information environment in Tunisia fundamentally changed from 2008 to 2010. In 2008, there were only 28,000 Facebook accounts in Tunisia, so basically the Sorbonne educated sons and daughters of the elite. Just 2 years later, there were 1.4 million, so 19% of the country of Tunisia. And cell phones in 2008 in Tunisia were largely only useful for making phone calls. 2 years later, there were more smartphones that were video enabled. And so people were able to capture and curate content from the protests that took place in 2010 that they simply weren't able to do in 2008. And the Ben Ali dictatorship, which was able to contain the information environment in 2008 with the protests coming from the Gafsa mining basin, was completely unable to do so in 2010. And so these tools clearly help enrich information environments. As to the question of how people can live in a world of oceans of data and whether this can help us live better informed, easier, more efficient, happier lives, or whether we're just going to drown in all of this data, I think that there is a measure of truth in both that it will cause a loss of control. I say the 21st century is a terrible time to be a control freak. I think that the ability to sort of remain private, the ability to just go about a 9-to-5 workday is significantly diminished by our living in a hyper-connected world. By the same token, I like that I can access whatever information I want, whatever time I want, by and large. I like the fact that I don't have to buy a book or check a book out of the library to learn one fact. But rather, I can go on a search engine and find it immediately. So I think that the net of this connectedness is overwhelmingly positive. But by the same token, I think it sometimes makes our lives more complicated than it was perhaps 10, 15, 20 years ago.